Hello everyone, my name is Terry Bartley and I am an author, a writer. My book Tyranny of the Fade just came out a little over a month ago, and I've been posting a lot of my TikTok videos here on YouTube, but I've not been posting much of anything else. So I'm going to start making content for YouTube. And it made sense to me that the first thing I make content about is about my journey as how I became a writer, how I became an author, and also like how my ADHD factors into that, because it absolutely does. So I've been writing for a very long time, right? Whenever I went to college for broadcast journalism. Even before that, I was writing a blog in high school. I've always written to some level, not quite professionally, but in this like semi-professional space where it's like amateur, but like I'm trying to be professional, right? And then I've done that to some capacity for much of my life. After I left college, I did like some comic book writing. I had a number of blogs where I did like fan reviews and like interviews and those kind of things, various podcasts. And basically I would sort of like do things for a while until I couldn't. There was always some barrier, whether it was money or time or something, or like my job got too busy, or like some other job opportunity came up and then I had to like go do that. And this sort of like kept happening. Like I kept kind of like getting close to where I wanted to be and then like having to start all the way over because I ended up like giving up what I was doing to do some other thing. And I really didn't know what I just thought this was my life. You know, this is just how I choose to live my life and it is what it is. Not a big deal. And that's kind of like where I landed for a long time. So I volunteered with this organization called the JCs or JCI USA. I served as a member and I ended up being part of this like fellowship class. Like it was a class of like the 12 like up and coming leaders in the organization. They gave us like these special trainings that nobody else got. And so we did this training about like public speaking. And she talked about how like to be a good public speaker, you needed to know like the important moments in your life, like what you would call like your milestones, like your big like important moments. You know, all of us did that. All of us sort of sat down and wrote down what we would consider milestone moments for us. Everybody had like a couple. I had like a full list. It was like 10 to 12 items. Because it was like, I did this, then I did that, then I did that, then I did that. And they all felt important. You know, like every time I would get a new job, I was like, this is the thing I'm meant to do. This is like my passion in life. I finally found this thing. Then some new thing would come up. And then that thing was my passion, was the thing that I always wanted to do. And like, I didn't realize that that was a thing that I was doing, but apparently I was. And I didn't realize that it was unusual until this moment, whenever everybody else didn't really have a giant list of milestones and I did. So, you know, I went on with my life. I didn't think a lot about it. And then one day I was watching the channel How to ADHD by Jessica McCabe, and they did a video about the wall of awful, which is this idea of like whenever you don't do something, you convince yourself other reasons why you don't do it, and it becomes like this ever-increasing wall that makes it harder and harder and harder to do the thing that you originally didn't do. And it really resonated with me, and I was like, I don't know, like I wonder what that means. And then I saw that the channel said How to ADHD, and I was like, I bet that has a thing to do with it. So I went back to the channel, and she has this video about like, do I have ADHD? So I watched the video and like she started listing symptoms. And it was this moment, if you've ever had to self-diagnose to some extent a mental health condition, you will be familiar with this experience. She was listing symptoms and it was like, okay, well that one's me. And then that one's me. And then I do that one and that one and that one. And then it was like, I do all of these things. And it was like something clicked in my head, like, do I have ADHD? I never thought I was. I had never been diagnosed. I never knew that there were signs that I had it. It was just a thing that I didn't know about myself. And then I saw this video and it was like, oh, that makes some sense. So then, you know, I did all the things you're supposed to do, right? I got a diagnosis. I went to like this clinic and they diagnosed me as ADHD. Like after I took some tests, I started seeing a therapist. I started getting prescriptions for medication so that I could like actually deal with this. And my life changed in a whole lot of ways. And one of the biggest ways it changed was knowing I had ADHD. Because one of the things that was my biggest challenge in life was this thing where I would get a job or then leave it and then get a job and then leave it. Basically, I was never getting seniority. I was never like progressing in a job because it was always some fully separate field whenever I got a new job. So it was like, this is a thing that I know I do now. So how can I not do that thing? Because the truth is, I knew that I was going to continue doing that. Like I know that if I get bored in a job, I'm probably going to find a different job. But I knew that I had to figure out some way to like channel this energy in a way that was productive for me. Whenever I went back to school to finish up my bachelor's degree, because by the way, I dropped out of college because ADHD reasons, honestly, I decided to get a degree in English because I'd always wanted to be a writer. I always loved the idea of like creating worlds and being this person that like creates fiction and just is an author. So I was like, well, what if I do that? You know, like I'd been dabbling for years. I'd written a comic, I'd written short stories. I started to write a novel, then I just kept rewriting the second chapter and never really moving past it. So I was like, well, what if I buckle down and like finally do it? What if I actually channel my energy into this thing? And then no matter what happens, this is the direction I go. This is the career I'm working on. and like nothing is going to sort of like stop me. I'm going to just continue working on this career of being an author. So that's what I did. I sat down one day, I outlined the entire novel. I was like, I need to get to the end of this. I need to figure out, and it took me, about a week or so to kind of like get all the pieces together. But it has like a real basic bullet point of like maybe like a sentence or less per chapter. So whenever I sat down to write, I knew what I was writing. And then the other thing was just kind of like accepting that maybe it wasn't perfect, but that's okay. Because the truth is you can't edit a novel that doesn't exist. You have to write something and get it on the page in order to be an author and to be able to like improve it and make it better and then eventually try to pursue it as published. So I just knew that I just had to do it. Like whether or not I was happy with the second chapter didn't matter. I just had to move on with it. Then I set some deadlines. I set like some long-term deadlines. Like I want to finish writing the book by this day. I want to do this other thing. Like I set some deadlines for myself to make sure that I like stuck to it also. And I feel like all of those are really important steps. So then I just started like writing regularly. Once a week I would drive to Starbucks. I would write for an hour or more. I'd get about a chapter out of the way. Then I would go home. And then the next week I'd do it again. And I did this every week for like a little over a year. And then eventually that turned into my novel. My novel is not published yet, but we'll get into that here in a second. So after I wrote the novel, the pandemic hit. Like it was like right around pandemic time. And I had to stay home and I started editing the novel. I was trying to edit it and like move past it. I had some beta readers that would give me some feedback. I knew what I needed to change. I needed to change it. So I was editing it and I just really didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know like where I wanted to go with it. And the truth is I just didn't know that I needed an editor, that like you should have an editor to like help you figure out like the big stuff to make your novel better. And like that's the thing that I really only recently realized within the past, year or so. So then I was like, well, I just got to do something. I got to keep writing again because I miss writing. If I don't write and make new original things, like I'm not as happy. Like writing kind of like gives me some level of joy and satisfaction. So I decided I was going to write short stories. I was just going to write a short story set in the same universe as the novel, primarily doing like side characters because the main characters have more story to tell in the novel and theoretically a book series if that comes after that. So I would write about the side characters and just kind of like give them adventures. And it was a really interesting way to world build actually because I was able to build more of the world and like flesh it out through the eyes of characters because I'm a very character driven writer and it's kind of challenging for me to do like the set down and just kind of like flesh out the world. I just don't love that like here's a list of like lore that I like for there to be some like character reason why something is the way it is. And writing the short stories with these like side characters really allowed me to do that in a way that felt more productive and like was more fun for me, which honestly, very ADHD, right? I was doing the thing I liked, but getting done the thing I didn't like by doing the thing I liked. So I'm telling you all this. So I'm an author, right? My first book, Tyranny of the Fae, just came out and I have ADHD. And those things are interlocked and they cannot be separated. I've basically found a way to channel my ADHD into writing. Writing is the way that I manage my ADHD. If I get a new thing that I want to do, like YouTube videos, or if I have a podcast, it's a way to further my writing career. That's the purpose of it, is to further my writing career. And like one of these things could take off, right? Like maybe the podcast becomes widely successful. Then maybe I will like put some more time into the podcast. But as of right now, the podcast is a tool for me to like network, meet other writers, because I interview other writers. Because most writers are fans. I talk to other writers. The first episode of my live season is actually on this channel right now. So it's a way for me to network and meet other writers, but then also it's a way for people to like discover me, right? Because like if those writers share that they were on my podcast, those people may discover me through my podcast because I'm hosting it and interviewing them. They might be curious about me, then they might sort of like discover my book. So it's like a tool for me to like get my name out there in a more effective way. So basically everything I do stems back to writing. And that's sort of how I've learned to manage my ADHD. Like figure out the thing that I want to do, have the big picture goal, and then any little thing I do on the side sort of like feeds back into it. It allows me to kind of like use all this chaotic energy that exists in my brain and sort of put it into something that I can actually turn into something. So Tyranny of the Fae is a collection of those short stories that I put together. I fleshed it out, gave some character arcs, made it a little bit better, I think. And that is what is out in the world right now. And it's basically a prequel to the novel that will be coming out next August. I know it's weird. Technically the novel is a sequel, right? Because it's not actually a prequel, it's a sequel. But the thing is, these are all sort of like subsidiary side characters. And all of this stuff that I'm releasing, because I have a number of things coming out over the next year, are all kind of the same kind of like side. I'm just publishing the short stories. I'm publishing the short stories into smaller books, which then will all lead me to the novel. So yeah, I'd love to talk about all this stuff later. If you guys have any questions, I'd love to sort of get some comments about sort of like my ADHD journey and what got me here, just to kind of figure out, get the ball rolling, get some other content for me to make. And the podcast will be here. The live season of my podcast will be airing on here every couple weeks. So just always tune in and you're going to get a cool interview with a cool writer. Like I said, the first interview is up now. I talked to a good friend of mine named Kirsha Fox. She's a fantasy author. Go check that out. All right, guys. Well, until next time, don't be afraid to tell your stories.